Lyricat in Loomian Legacy is bad. You should not try building or trying to make this Loomian work in PvP, because Lyricat is, in my opinion, one of the worst Loomians in this small update, which is not really that big of an update, but yeah, Lyricat, based on its stats, based on its move pool, based on what things it's gonna get in the future, or the things that it has now, Lyricat is probably one of the worst Loomians to come out of this update, and one of the worst typeless types Loomians in the game. So let's get on with the video. Now, just a quick overview. Its typeless type doesn't really help it out that much, and that's one of the reasons why it's kind of bad in my opinion. Typeless types doesn't really provide you with any resistances. Unlike Pokemon, typeless types in this game doesn't help you resist anything. It's not immune to spirit, it's not really immune to anything else, and it doesn't resist anything. However, it is still weak to something, and I think the only things that hit typeless types super effectively are Brawler and Mine types. Now, Brawler types or Brawler type moves in the metagame are actually pretty common because C.B.O, Ursul, and Wrestlin are all Brawler types that will hit this thing super effectively, as well as Metagon being, you know, a Mind and a Brawler type, so that's not really that great, considering that all of those Loomians are pretty good. But that's not the main selling point of why this thing is so bad. It actually lies in its base stats. Now, admittedly, Lyricat's move pool is actually pretty decent because Peace of Mind, Provoke, Magnify, Hypnotize, and Barter are admittedly very good support moves. But this doesn't really help Lyricat because of its base stats bringing it down. Let me give you an example. Magnify combined with the new item. The new item lets you live a super effective hit that would normally one-shot you, so you can get a free Magnify off. Great! Now you're dealing double the damage, and let me remind you, you have 97 range attack, base range attack. That is lower than Avatros's melee attack when you consider both of them as the same stat. Avatros, that needs Brawn boost. Now I'm not going to say any more, but double the damage, great. However, you are still slower than a lot of the metagame sweepers / cleaners, and why use that and waste an item slot or a turn while you can potentially use something more safer and a lot more better like Zulong or Protogon. Protogon can get a boost when it gets in the battle, and Zulong here, it can just pivot out when it feels like it's not a good matchup for it. So this means that Magnify is not really a good setup for it because it doesn't increase its defenses, and the problem still lies that it doesn't have a lot of good defenses for it to tank hits. However, Peace of Mind and Provoke, you might say, well, this is a good combo because Provoke can stop Loomians in front of it from setting up or stopping it from setting up. Then Peace of Mind will make it so it can set up and won't be afraid of range attackers that will expose this range defense stat. And you don't have a point there because you are still gonna have to try and switch in as safely as possible, and that means you're gonna have to have a pivot on your team. And that's one of the big problems because this thing's gonna need a lot of support for it to do what it needs to do. It doesn't have good, decent defensive stats like Zeppelin, Namare, Valkyrie, or whatever. It has bad defenses, so it can't switch in on its own. It doesn't have recovery, so it can't do that either. And since its defenses really suffer, it can't switch in properly without having a pivot. And okay, you have a pivot now. What are you gonna do? You can have this on the field, or you can have something better on the field that doesn't particularly rely on a pivot, but extremely gets even more better with a pivot. This means that while Peace of Mind Provoke might actually be pretty good on this thing when in the right circumstances, it's not really that great for a lot of the matchups in the metagame when there are just better Loomians. Not to mention that some other Loomians like Swolder, Venolin, Aeligwana, Setimars are all getting better moves that do a lot more damage, and considering that your melee and range defenses are pretty low, you're not going to be dealing a lot of damage to those walls, and you're not going to be surviving a lot of hits. Now, Hypnotize and Barter, I won't be talking about these moves a lot because, you know, they're not really that great. But Barter might actually be alright considering that Burn isn't a good thing on most Loomians, but unlike this Loomian, Lyricat won't be staying in on the battle that much, so the burn won't affect it that much, so you can just throw away the burn, which is admittedly okay. Toxic Orb, Heavy Shackles, and Thunder Orb, they're not really that great considering that you're just going to be hurting your viability. Unless you throw all of those moves out on the first turn, you're going to be stuck with that status for the whole rest of the battle. And for Hypnotize, admittedly this might actually seem pretty good, but then again, you are at a 75% chance, and most of the time that's not going to be a really good chance to be working off of, so you might as well going to be wasting a turn of potentially no setup. And for the last thing I'm going to be mentioning here, this thing has a lack of coverage. Headache Split and Rant might actually be pretty good because, you know, Mind is a unique move that doesn't get used a lot for its typing and can scare a lot of Loomians out. However, Headache Split is really low in terms of power. It is 60 base power, and that's not really great considering you do have 97 range attack. And when you have other moves like Rant is even worse. While you do lower a defense, it's not really that great considering while this can't steamroll like Aqua Jaw from Garlash or Blowtox, Rant can't steamroll when your defenses are very low. Not to mention that Raging Howl, while that might actually be a pretty good move, High Pitched Screech is more, how do you say this, it's more versatile and it's a lot more safer considering that you're going to be lowering your HP even more with Raging Howl, so that's not really that great, and Tone Deaf actually boosts High Pitched Screech. So, overall, Lyricat is a bad Loomian in my opinion because of how much its defenses suffer from its move pool. Its defenses actually probably might not even matter if Lyricat was even faster and it was a lot stronger. But thanks to its base stat spread, Lyricat isn't being able to perform as much as it probably should be. Not to mention that the Typeless type doesn't help it at all because Typeless doesn't bring any resistances to the table, and it's weak to a really strong offensive typing in the game. And for the final reason, while Tone Deaf might boost High Pitched Screech, which admittedly might do a decent chunk of damage, Peace of Mind, Provoke, and Magnify simply do not fit this thing consistently, and with Barter and Hypnotize, they're just secondary options for you to have some fun with. Headache Split and Rant are one of the worst moves for it to get, considering that these two moves are really low in base power. So, that's my opinion on Lyricat. Comment down below on what you think about this Loomian, and your disagrees or agrees on what you have on this. Let me know down below, and of course, make sure to like and subscribe. I would like to know what you guys think about Lyricat, and Maybe you can convince me that this is actually a good Loomian.